Civil rights activist James Weldon Johnson wrote Lift Every Voice and Sing as a poem, which was set to music by his brother John Rosamond Johnson in 1899. The song is now known as the Black National Anthem in America. It is a protest, a hymn, and a prayer of profound significance for our people. We lift every voice and sing to express ourselves. We lift every voice to show that we have strength in numbers and we will not be silent. We lift every voice and sing to be lifted, liberated, and free.
Freedom, the power to determine action without restraint. Freedom, the absence of or release from ties, obligations, or restrictions. Freedom, the ease or facility of movement or action. Freedom, frankness or boldness in manner or speech. Freedom, a political right. Until we are all free, none of us is free. Black lives matter. Black lives matter. Black lives matter.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the roaring sea. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod. Built in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat, have not our weary feet come to the place from which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary ears, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought
afternoon, and welcome to the first ever Juneteenth celebration hosted by the City of Cambridge Employees Committee on Diversity and sponsored by the City Manager's Office and the Mayor's Office. My name is Safana Anwar, and I'm the Vice Chair of the committee. Earlier, I had referred to this event as a celebration because that's exactly what it was for those brothers and sisters who were also equal citizens of this planet but were not treated as such, and sadly still are not. It's a celebration because it took hundreds of years of oppression, repression, and suppression to reach this milestone. And just in case you didn't know, officially, the proclamation to end slavery was made more than 2 years earlier. So please take a second to digest the lag in time. It puts everything in a different perspective, doesn't it? Especially since we live in this era of instant communication, or when we feel we didn't get paid for those couple of extra minutes we put in, many people and their entire families worked for free under brutal conditions their whole lives. Why? Not because of lack of intelligence, endurance, or anything else. It's simply because of the shade of one's skin tone. You might think, well, this happened so long ago. Surprise! It's still happening. The oppression, repression, and the suppression, it's very real. So what can you, as a City of Cambridge employee, a representative of this community, an ambassador, do? Educate yourselves. Can you truly represent our diverse communities if you don't know anything about them? It's hard, but we are in this together. On that note, for those who are not familiar with the committee, our driving force, our mission is to assist with the enrichment of our workforce with different ideas and ways of expressing ourselves through ongoing discussions and programs such as this. I also want to take this opportunity to acknowledge our amazing committee members. They, in addition to their regular jobs, put so much time and effort into addressing the many elephants in the room and then exploring ways in which the wider workforce can do the same. Our committed committee members are Amelia Jazalo from the LGBTQ+ Commission, Angela Pierre from the Budget Office, Betsy Allen from the Equity and Inclusion Office, Deborah Copeland-Montu from the Community Development Department, Deirdre Brown from Personnel, Elizabeth Speakman from Domestic Violence Initiative, Kimberly Sansauci from the Women's Commission, Muna Kangzan from the Library Department, and Shu Wang from the Purchasing Department. And of course, none of this would be possible without the assistance of the outstanding leadership we have, starting with the mayor and the city manager and his team, especially Lee Janetti. Thank you both for all your support. Mr. Manager, every single time we propose an event, especially the ones that highlight the core beliefs from our Cambridge Anti-Racism, Equity and Inclusion Initiative, the first thing you always say is, "What can my team and I do to assist you?" Leaders who break barriers lead change. Thank you for continuously paving our way with your encouragement and empowerment. And now I would like to introduce you all to our fearless leader, the city manager, Louis A. D. Pasquale. Thank you.
Good afternoon and welcome to the City of Cambridge Juneteenth celebration. Juneteenth celebrates the day, June 19, 1865, that a Union general informed enslaved people in Galveston, Texas, of their freedom and the end of the Civil War. The announcement in Texas was 2 months after the end of the war, and more than 2.5 years after President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. Juneteenth is the oldest known celebration commemorating the end of slavery in the United States. Observing Juneteenth is a way to commemorate the end of slavery in the United States, allow for critical reflection on the progress made, and serve as a call to action for the work still to be done. Having Juneteenth a legal holiday here in the Commonwealth and in the city is consistent with the Cambridge Equity and Inclusion core beliefs. It is a symbolic and meaningful statement by the city to acknowledge and recognize the significance of racism, slavery, and emancipation in this country. The Employees Committee on Diversity has designed today's program to engage, raise awareness, commemorate, and celebrate together this momentous moment in our history. I want to say a special thank you to Muna and Tafana for their leadership. I have been meeting with them regularly to discuss the work of the committee and how we can grow future programs that the committee offers. They are doing a great job in supporting the work of the Employees Committee on Diversity. Finally, I want to thank the committee for their hard work. I know that a lot of work was required to put together this celebration, and it would not be possible without the hard work of the committee. I am proud my office could co-sponsor this important employee gathering, and I hope you're enjoying today's event. Thank you for all your support.
Mayor Sumbul Siddiqui, and I'm so pleased to be here with you today to commemorate Juneteenth. I have a proclamation from my office that I would love to share with you. Whereas, on June 19th, people throughout the country shall be celebrating Juneteenth, which commemorates June 19, 1865, the day in which slavery was formally abolished in the state of Texas, and which has come to be regarded as the final formal date of emancipation of all remaining former slaves throughout the United States of America at the end of the Civil War. And whereas 45 states in the Union currently recognize Juneteenth and celebrate this holiday each year in acknowledgement of the ending of one of the most shameful aspects of this country's history, and in the continual hope that the United States shall forever strive to become a more perfect union, and shall forever work to move closer to its founding ideals of being a nation where all citizens truly are considered equal. And whereas, in the 155 years since the end of the Civil War, the United States has unquestionably made great strides and has also suffered numerous, at times heartbreaking, setbacks in the long march towards a true civic equality for all of its citizens. And whereas Juneteenth remains an important date for us to pause each year to reflect upon the progress we have made and to commemorate the work that remains as we seek to create a more just country for the generations yet to come. And whereas in 2020, the City Council went on record to recognize June 19th as Juneteenth in the city of Cambridge and to formally observe June 19th as a Juneteenth holiday this year and every year thereafter. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Sumbul Siddiqui, Mayor of the City of Cambridge, Massachusetts, do hereby proclaim June 19, 2021 as Juneteenth and urge all Cambridge residents to reflect upon the meaning of this very important day. Thank you.
What is Juneteenth? Juneteenth, also known as Freedom Day or Jubilee Day, is an African-American holiday that commemorates June 19, 1865. That was the day that the last of the emancipated slaves were freed. On January 1, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation as the nation approached its third year of civil war. The proclamation declared that all persons held as slaves within the rebellious states are and henceforward shall be free.
Wait, the Emancipation Proclamation was signed in January of 1863 and took over 2 years for the last of the slaves to be made free?
Yep, you got it. The country was still entrenched in a bloody war, which helped to slow communications. On top of that, many plantation owners kept the news from their slaves.
Well, at least now they were all free.
Well, not exactly. While yes, the Emancipation Proclamation had been signed, technically slavery had not been abolished. Lincoln recognized that the proclamation needed to be followed by a constitutional amendment. Enter the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution provides that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. The necessary number of states to agree to the amendment was reached on December 6, 1865.
And then they were free?
Yes, they were technically free, but the situation was a bit more complicated. You see, slavery was effectively abolished, except when used as a punishment for crime. Once slaves were freed, they weren't given any help with where to go and what to do. There was basically a large body of people with nowhere to go. Immediately, the former overseer force started arresting black people for things such as vagrancy and trespassing on the only land they knew. Once convicted of these crimes, these freed slaves found themselves once again in bondage. To avoid being arrested for these crimes, some slaves made deals with their former masters wherein they agreed to work the land, turning over a majority of the crops and profits to the owners in return for being allowed to live on the land. This tactic allowed plantation owners to keep their workforce and profit while making sure that former slaves did not make enough money to start anything for themselves. As these former slaves continued to attempt to build something for themselves, they found ways to flourish and began to create the beginnings of a new future. In 1921, Tulsa, Oklahoma's Greenwood district, known as Black Wall Street, was one of the most prosperous African American communities in the United States. There were grocery stores, banks, barbershops. Some residents even owned their own planes. But on May 31st of that year, the Tulsa Tribune falsely reported that a black man, Dick Rowland, attempted to rape a white woman, Sarah Page. As a result of the Tulsa Tribune's racially inflammatory report, black and white armed mobs arrived at the courthouse. Scuffles broke out and shots were fired. 12 people were killed, 10 white and 2 black. As news of these deaths spread throughout the city, mob violence exploded. White rioters rampaged through the black neighborhood that night and morning, killing men and burning and looting stores and homes. Both politicians and the media falsely framed the Tulsa riot as an uprising started by lawless blacks. The police disregarded due process, arresting blacks and interning them in detention camps. Meanwhile, no whites were arrested. In just 16 hours, police had arrested 60% of the black residents living in Black Wall Street. Mobs burned black-owned businesses and homes and murdered hundreds of black citizens. When black men joined forces to protect their homes, they were ultimately driven out in fear for their lives. By today's estimates, the dreadful and murderous 16 hours caused more than $30 million in damages. The residents of Greenwood were blamed for the death and destruction, and the government made it nearly impossible to rebuild. During the 1950s and 1960s, there began an unprecedented movement for black Americans to gain equal rights under the law in the United States. The Civil War had officially abolished slavery, but it didn't end discrimination against black people. They continued to endure the devastating effects of racism, especially in the South. By the mid-20th century, black Americans had had more than enough of prejudice and violence against them. They, along with many white Americans, mobilized and began an unprecedented fight for equality that spanned 2 decades. During the Civil Rights Movement, African Americans continued to push for their freedoms and rights, forming activist groups such as the Black Panther Party. The Panthers taught self-reliance and unity among all people while also standing in resistance against all oppressors. Like all of the other pro-black institutions before them, the Panthers were discredited, disrupted, and systematically eliminated by racist policies, practices, and propaganda. Today's activism is more widespread than ever and takes many different forms as black people and their allies continue to raise their voices within society. You can see people elevating the black experience by openly celebrating their heritage through fashion, art, music, and even the natural hair movement, Black people are taking a stand and showing their history and culture are as integral and important as any other. Injustice is being addressed head-on, and it is coming from every corner of the Black community. It is being spotlighted by actors, athletes, musicians, and many more. One of the more recent waves of resistance is being led by the Black Lives Matter movement, which was started in 2013 by Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal Tometi. This organization was originally formed as a response when a young boy named Trayvon Martin was racially profiled, stalked, and murdered for the crime of wearing a hoodie and walking home while Black. His killer was acquitted using the controversial Stand Your Ground law, which has time and time again been used to justify the assault and murder of Black people, while seldom protecting their rights. A new movement was born, and you can see the effects today. So as you can see, we celebrate Juneteenth because it was the beginning of the future where Black people began their struggle for equal rights and treatment in the United States of America. Every Black person you see is an extension of those brave souls who had to carve out a place for themselves in this country.
Wow, that's incredible. I had no idea. How can I help?
Well, you can help by joining in and using your own voice to help affect change. You can sign petitions in support of various efforts to bring about equitable legislation that level the playing field for Black people. You can donate your money and time to organizations that effectively address the systemic racism in place against Black people. Most importantly, you can do the research on the candidates in your local and state elections and use the information to vote out officials who stand on inherently racist legislation and practices. Vote in progressive candidates who will champion a fair and equal treatment of Black people. Juneteenth is the celebration of the beginning of the first steps towards making Black people equal in this country. So on June 19th, don't be afraid to say, Happy Juneteenth.
So I didn't grow up celebrating Juneteenth, and I only found out what it was when I was older, when a friend from down south explained it to me. I'm thrilled that Cambridge is celebrating it this year. I think it's an important recognition of the incredible suffering and struggle that played such a large part in shaping the country today, for both better and worse. I think it also represents perseverance and the importance of continuing to try and be better.
Think of all the strength you have in you. From the blood you carry within you, ancient and powerful men and women built this civilization. Happy Black History Month. My name is Tia Fuller, and I am the producer and director of this next group, the Esperanza Spalding Ensemble, featuring Berkeley's own and my girl, DJ Val. It's an honor and a privilege to present this medley in celebration of our rich Black culture and royal heritage. We are all standing on the shoulders of kings and queens. We are all standing on the shoulders of those who have come before. We are the ones who first studied the stars and built the pyramids. We celebrate those who have built a nation, who have transcended despite hardship and pain. We are thriving, we are excellent, and yes, honey, we are Black gold. I hope you enjoy.
Eternity, spending only seconds in pure consciousness. If the courage Rat Brown had to be different, I am mesmerized by the essence of all this beauty. And as sure as I live, I know there is a Black Messiah coming.
Hold your head as high as you can, high enough to see who you are, little man. Life sometimes is cold and cruel, baby, no one else will tell you, so remember that. You are black gold, black gold. You are black gold. Now maybe no one else has ever told you so.
urge has set me free. Godspeed, Godspeed. Pure spirit mind is me. But if you look into my eyes, moving deep, moving wise, I am love.
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me through the very dirt, but still like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns, and the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed heads and lower eyes, shoulders falling over like teardrops, weakened from my soulful cries. Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines, digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise? 'Cause I dance like I've got diamonds at the meetings of my thighs. Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind the nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I in the hope and dreams of a slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. We rise because we are black gold. We rise because we are kings and queens. We rise because we are crowned and kissed.
someone to hold him. Carried all the words on your shoulders, made a way for the future. Don't even make a sound, don't worry about a thing. I'm here to love you. My kisses are your crown and I'm your queen, so now lie with me, my king. I'm here to love you. Lay your burdens down, don't even make a sound, don't worry about a thing. I'm here to love you. My kisses are your crown and I'm your queen, so now lie with me, my king. I'm here to love you.
Hello, I'm Betsy Allen, the Director of Equity and Inclusion for the city. Happy Juneteenth Day to you all. How did we happen to get this momentous occasion? Well, on June 19th, 1865, Army General Gordon Granger went to Texas and said, by the way, slavery ended, you all are free. But wait, the Emancipation Proclamation was 2.5 years earlier. So what happened? Well, what happened was a lot of slave owners did not let slaves know that they had been freed. So harvest after harvest after harvest, they kept getting free labor from people who had been freed. And so for that reason, symbolically, we see June 19th, 1865 as Black Independence Day. It's also known as Juneteenth Independence Day, which is what it's called here in Massachusetts. Happy to say that last year, Governor Baker signed it into law, and it's a Massachusetts holiday for which you cannot be made to work. It's like Memorial Independence Day. It's a paid holiday. Alcohol sales are prohibited, just like they are on those other 2 days. So, happy Juneteenth, everybody.
Make us fight on the hill in the early day, constant chill deep inside. Shouting gun on they run through the endless gray, on they fight for their right, yes, but who's to say? Make us fight on the hill in the early day, constant chill deep inside. A shouting gun on they run through the endless gray, on they fight for the right, yes, but who's to say? For a hillman would kill, why they do not know. Stiffen wounds test their pride. Men of fire still alive through the raging glow, gone insane from the pain that they surely know. For the bell tolls, time marches on. crack and roar, massive roar fills the crumbling sky. Shattered gold fills his soul with a ruthless cry. Stranger now are his eyes to this mystery. Here's the silence so loud. Crack of dawn, all is gone except our will to be. Now they see what will be blinded eyes to see. From the bell tolls, from the bell tolls, from the bell
My name is Anthony Wilson. I'm the city clerk for the city of Cambridge. When I think of Juneteenth, I think about the fact that the Civil War ended in May of 1865. I think of the fact that around that time period, slaveholders in the Confederate States fled their areas into Texas and took with them the people that they were enslaving in the hopes that they could continue their practices in the state of Texas, hopefully away from the Union. I think the fact that it took a month for the Union to reach Texas and declare slavery abolished in all states of the Union. When I think of those facts, it reminds me that evil and injustice will find a way to dig into the deepest, darkest crevices of our society and try to hide there from justice and from the rest of us, and that we must work to root it out wherever it exists so that we can have a more just and fair society.
My skin is black, my arms are long, my hair is woolly, and my back is strong, strong enough to take the pain inflicted again and again. What do they call me? My name is Aunt Sarah. My name is Aunt Sarah. My skin is yellow. My hair is long. Between two worlds, I do belong. My father was rich and white. He forced my mother late one night. What do they call me? My name's Sophronia. Sophronia. My skin is tan. My hair is fine. My hips invite you, daddy. My mouth like wine. Who's a little girl am I? Will anyone who has money to buy? What do they call me? My name is Sweet Thing. Sweet Thing.
Happy Juneteenth to everyone.
Juneteenth is a deeply emotional moment for enslaved people because for decades, for centuries, enslaved people prayed for, hoped for, fought for in the form of slave rebellions, running away, bought their freedom when they could. And if you read slave narratives, if you listen to spirituals from the era of slavery, you know that enslaved people longed for freedom. This was something that had been hoped for, but many believe may never come.
Well, the water promised to give me $40 a month in fed. Well, lots of the boys say they ain't want it. They rather go free, you know.
Being able to go wherever they wanted, being able to wonder about. For enslaved people, it was an expression of their freedom.
Well, Matt Porter was the one that belonged to Miss Porter, one of our white folks in Navy. She come along, we all sitting on the fence, and the colored soldier come along and asked her did she want to go with him. And she said yes, she mounted one of them horses. She went on with them. I never did see her and hear tell of her no more.
When I think about Juneteenth, I think about it in the context of Emancipation Day celebrations that began January 1, 1863. They took on a whole new meaning when slavery was formally abolished after 1865. You would have had African-American veterans who fought in the Civil War be prominent in these celebrations, dressed in their military garb, speeches from enslaved people, the most prominent Black politicians singing of hymns, spirituals, discussions of registering to vote. Enslaved people celebrating in public their newfound freedom was an act of resistance. Because we have to remember, slavery came to an end after a 4 years bloody Civil War. Still the bloodiest conflict in American history. Many people in the South and in the nation who did not want to see slavery abolished fought tooth and nail to block the 13th Amendment. The abolition of slavery created a huge humanitarian crisis in the South. Suddenly 4 million people have very little means to take care of themselves, to support themselves, and do so in a really hostile environment. So the military was necessary to make sure that enslaved people got the food, the medicine, the shelter that they needed in order to survive. They're also there to protect, to the extent that that was possible, freed people from violence, from recriminations, from slaveholders, from Confederates who still hadn't given up the fight.
And I remember when the Yankees stopped here, and the Yankees stopped right on the corner of Square, and they prosecuting people, you know. We go to the ground team, and they take them, hang them over the slum. That's the punishment they got. Next time you see, they come a whole troop of Yankees, all riding horses, big guns hanging on. I said, Mama, where are they going? They're all going home now.
When the last federal troops leave the South, it's a signal to Southerners. The federal government wasn't going to put its might into ensuring the civil rights of Black people would be observed. You have 20, 30 years later, Black people being lynched in public, and there isn't a federal anti-lynching law to protect them. In most communities in America, there's a history of lynching and racial violence, and very few communities have marked that, commemorated that. Every decade since the end of slavery, Black people have been more educated, accrued more wealth, more status in American society. Every decade since 1865. But there's been one constant, and that constant is the presence of random racist violence. What I see in George Floyd's murder was a white police officer attempting to dominate and to subdue a Black man who was not resisting, who could not resist. Even though slavery came to an end in 1865, the desire to master and dominate Black bodies did not. And we have never dealt with that. These are the kinds of stark realities that are highlighted during Juneteenth. If Black people's lives can be expunged through racist violence and no one is held accountable, how free are we? Are we free?
For me, Juneteenth is about honoring my ancestors and those who came before me, and recognizing their struggle and how they have shaped me. And I'm so honored and proud that the city of Cambridge is recognizing Juneteenth, and that means a lot to me.
Hello, I'm Ruka White, and what you're about to see is a solo performed by the beautiful Berkeley performer Christian Gonzalez. In this, we collaborated together, working with the piece Strange Fruit, first recorded in 1938 by Billie Holiday. And in this solo, his body represents a site of protest, a protest against the deep South, right, and its brutal slayings and lynching, but also the lynching, the metaphorical lynchings that are alive today in the form of Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, and Emmett Till still. And in spite of all that, there's still this audacity to hope, and there's still the will to dream.
Southern trees bear strange fruit, blood on the leaves, blood at the root. Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. Pastoral scene of the gallant South, the bulging eyes and the twisted mouths. Scent of magnolia, so sweet and fresh. Then the sudden smell of burning flesh. Here is a fruit for the crows to pluck. for the rain to gather, for the wind to suck, for the sun. For the sun to rise, for the trees to drop, the trees to drop. Strange and bitter cry. Strange and bitter.
As a child, Juneteenth celebrations were hosted by our church and felt like a giant family reunion. Lots of food, fun, games, and tons of stories of the past, the challenges and victories of African Americans in this country. As a veteran, mother, and grandmother, it is extremely important to me to ensure that my family continues to learn and know how incredibly precious our freedom is, and that the history of our people is woven throughout the fabric of this nation. I feel tremendously proud and blessed to be able to witness this time in history as we acknowledge and celebrate Juneteenth officially as a state. Peace, blessings, and happy Juneteenth to the city of Cambridge.
The hill we climb. Mr. President, Madam Vice President, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny Black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but this doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, and characters of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, In this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour. But within it, we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens, but one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from our bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the West. We will rise from the windswept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and dutiful, will emerge battered but beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
So when I think about Juneteenth, I have mixed emotions, happy or joyous emotions at the thought of the actual end of slavery in the States, but more sullen or sad emotions when I think of the disconnect between how the laws governing Black Americans say we're supposed to be treated in this country, and the disconnect between the actual treatment of Black Americans in this country, historically and present day. So Juneteenth carries with it, for me, mixed emotions.
Juneteenth, Freedom Day, particularly in Texas where it started as a celebration of the Emancipation Proclamation, going into effect 2.5 years after President Abraham Lincoln issued it. Slaves in Texas did not know that they were free until June 19, 1865. Juneteenth is definitely the beginning of African Americans being able to inspire and empower themselves and rebuild their lives here in the United States. So indeed, Juneteenth is a day to commemorate. So happy Juneteenth.